And we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the FreudenFreude weekly podcast, where we bring you content to help you grow and develop as a person and as a leader. Very much in line with what we started last week, we are talking about strategies to overcome setbacks in our resilience series. Actually, it wasn't last week. It was like longer ago. It was like a month ago or something, when we talked about these resilience topics.
Yes.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Claudia. How are everybody? I'm Sandra Corona.
Hi, I'm Claudia Cimenti. I do work with executives, leaders, entrepreneurs, as well as their teams in tech and beyond.
And I work with expats, executives, and young professionals, coaching them to deal with their values, beliefs, and everything related to culture.
Fantastic, fantastic. And we are
coaches.
Yes, we are coaches. So, we can't take the coach out of the conversation. So that's the flavor we are going for today. So we are going to talk strategies for overcoming setbacks. I think one thing that we touched on last time in redefining failure was that it's going to happen, people. Yeah, we're all going to have setbacks. Stuff is not going to work out the way that we hoped, the way that we planned. And, the proverbial whatever is going to hit the fan on occasion. And so, what are some of the strategies, some of the coping mechanisms maybe that we can employ to get us through those times? And actually that bouncing back from failures, setbacks, mistakes, stuff just not working out. That is what resilience really is all about. What do you think?
One of the things about setbacks is that, unfortunately, I have to say, unfortunately, not everybody is ready for plan B, right? People hope to always nail it at the first. And also, depending on the culture you're coming from, they usually say, measure twice and cut once. That's easier said than done. But the truth is that there's always going to be something. And what's most important is, like Claudia was saying, you should expect them. They happen to everybody. And there's nothing more reassuring than to know that this is prone to happen. And when you have it or you feel it, when you experience it and you let it happen, it's a little bit less stressful than if you were to try to hold it and think that you can control it.
Yeah, when it hits you unawares, it's doubly painful, right? It's like you can't literally brace for impact because you don't see it coming. And maybe that is the first strategy for dealing with setbacks. It is to know that they might be coming and kind of maybe even not keep an eye out for them because we don't want to dilute our focus, but nevertheless kind of be prepared to some extent, maybe with a plan B, maybe just with the awareness in somewhere in the back of your mind that it might not go the way that you originally planned. So that is a really good one, because if we know that failure is an integral part of life, is not unique to you, mind you. It is something that is just part of the game. It's very difficult to always or impossible. I would venture out and say impossible to always get it right on the first try to the exact standards that you or somebody else has set. So if you know that is happening anyway, despite your potential best efforts, because you can't control everything, I guess that not beating ourselves up on top of everything is another strategy. Because if stuff happens, you're already in a state that you maybe need to struggle to hold things together, or to
Mm-hmm.
or as they say, land on your feet. If on
Mm-hmm.
top of that insult you add injury, or you add the insult to the injury, or whatever, however the thing is, that makes it doubly worse. If on top of just dealing with the repercussions of things not working out, you are the one that like flagellates yourself on top of it, it just saps your energy even all the more. So I think kind of like being a little bit graceful and forgiving might be a wrong word, but accepting of what's going on, and just going with the flow a little bit more gently
Mm-hmm.
might be another strategy. I think that would be very important. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, one of the things that I was thinking of before we get to the next one that I would like to mention is that you made me think about a psychologist. And she was talking about that acknowledgement comes with self-awareness. And one of her trainings while she was still at school was to be self-aware, to live in the moment, to experience the moment, because the purpose was for them to be able to recognize their emotions, what they were feeling, how they were breathing, and everything, like the moment, even from your feet touching the ground, and everything that vibrates in you. And she said that she was making fun that you would think that psychologists or people in that field that are studying to be in that field and help others, they would take it seriously, the practice to take it seriously. And it wasn't that case, because everybody was like, oh, but what is this about? They didn't believe in the importance of being self-aware until she was met with, and creating all these theses and all this kind of stuff that she had to write. She chose to go out on a run. And as she was running, she started focusing on her breathing without noticing. She started focusing on how her feet would feel with every time they would bounce against the floor, and this kind of stuff that she started acknowledging. And as she started acknowledging how she was living in that moment, she started also thinking about how much homework she had, all these papers that she had to turn in, and so on and so on, into the acknowledgement phase or the self-awareness phase. And then she would be pulled back by the responsibilities and the stress and everything else. And then she would try to fight it again by trying to connect with herself. And until she realized that the best way to go through the process of what she was acknowledging, which was the stress and the fears of not being able to have time to complete her work on time, meet deadlines, that it was best for her to just let it go. And then once that she started letting go all of those emotions, all of those fears, all of those ideas and thoughts and beliefs and all that kind of stuff, it was easier for her to sit down and continue writing, and just kind of resetting the process. And then she would be able to perform. She would be able to move on to the next phase. And so thank you for allowing me to say that. One of the other things that I wanted to mention also was to don't play the blame game, right? One of the things that we do when we are in a setback is to say, you always want to know where things went wrong, and you're focusing on the mistake.
Well, whose fault it is. And
exactly. Yeah. And you're like, okay, what did I do wrong? And this and that, instead of saying, okay, we effed up. I mean, because that's the word, you effed up. And now what can we do based on what we've done before? What works, and what are we experiencing? What is happening at this moment? What options can we do? But no, we have to blame ourselves, because it kind of makes us feel good that we are acknowledging the mistakes that we're doing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's a natural tendency. And here I think that we should maybe mention that there is a time and a space for self-reflection and back and trying to figure those things out, essentially where did things started to go wrong and how can we potentially handle it better the next time around. There's a time and space for that, but it might not be just there in the heat of the battle, as you say.
Exactly.
Already carrying such an emotional charge potentially, and you're just struggling to keep momentum up and do whatever you need to do. So at some point, just having a little bit of this Teflon attitude to let it just slide off and to just focus on the here and now and how to more or less gracefully exit this hole that you ungracefully fell into. So I think that is something, and there's this thing that I really like. It's like this dancing to the music that's playing. Right? It's like in that moment, the tune has changed abruptly, and you might have gone from waltz to techno, and you have to kind of switch these gears, and you can't continue to force yourself to, continue trying to fit a waltz into this techno dancing. So I think that it's just this switching gears and maybe, pushing off a little bit the self-reflection and this figuring out what you can learn from all this to a later date. And, that is definitely one of the things, because blaming others and falling into negative self-talk and things like that, it's not helpful at that particular moment. I think that just pops into my head now as well, as you expect things to happen and as you kind of know that it's part of reality that things can go haywire, even beforehand, you can think about, maybe visualize or do a mental rehearsal of all these different things that could potentially go wrong. You want obviously always to focus on the things that will go right and your plan A. That is definitely the thing. But as you think about it, anticipate a little bit. Prepare maybe a little bit more elaborately and allow yourself a little bit more of this taking off of the blinders, because I think we often get so enamored with our plans and so focus on just this one thing that we keep, we shut out kind of the periphery a little bit. So that might be another one, like to already know beforehand what your coping mechanisms might be. If this goes wrong, I'm going to call this person and ask for help or guidance, or I am going to react this or that way, right? So always hope for the best, prepare for the worst. I think that there's some truth in that. What do you think?
You're saying something very important, because it is very true that something that we do is that we catastrophize, right? We do think about all the things that can go wrong, and very little do we spend time thinking about the things that can actually go right. And where I think it's a micro cultural thing, meaning it comes from your parents. It's something that is ingrained into you from the moment that you were born, which means how are you going to deal with these issues? How are you going to deal with setbacks? And think about, these are just simple setbacks that we're mentioning. These are things that sound very simple, but when you apply it or want to apply it towards real conflicts, towards real life issues, from divorce to getting fired to being sued to having a difficulty with a neighbor. I mean, all of these things, it just sounds like what we're saying is like, oh, it's so simple. It's not simple. It really is not simple. What matters here is that you might not be prepared or come prepared properly from your parents and your siblings and your family, but there are ways for you to help yourself manage and deal with these everyday setbacks in a better way possible. And that is to always remember that you only have control of how you behave and how you react, not how everybody else. So when you try to change before I say that, think about how hard it is to try to change yourself. So how do you expect to change the rest? Yeah, right? It's very hard.
You better give up on the idea altogether, because,
Exactly.
You are not, people don't change. You might have constructive discussions where you can maybe discuss a perspective change and things like that, but fundamentally people are just going to be themselves, and that's okay, as long as we know it and we can kind of adjust for it, because frankly all we have control over is our attitude and the effort we put into things.
Exactly.
And so, given that that's the only variables you can bring to the table, just the rest you just have to take in stride. And,
yes.
I think that, others don't necessarily make these changes better, but they can, because, there's the ones that are going to blame you. There's always going to be naysayers and people that are going to blame you, but there can also be a support network. Maybe one that you're aware of, maybe one that you can find when you need it. So, you are not alone in life. Nobody can cry for you, right? I mean, sometimes if stuff happens, you are the one who needs to go through it. But on the other hand, you don't necessarily need to go it alone. So maybe that is even a strategy, a coping strategy for setbacks, that you can already kind of plan beforehand and have a bit prepared, that you have built these relationships. Maybe you have even forewarned some people in your support network that, this and that might come down the pike, and I might reach out to you for help or just a shoulder to cry on. So, just prepare for that as well. Prepare for that.
Right. Something that just popped up in the back of my mind is something that we kind of fear to talk about, to mention as part of the support, but it might be well worth to mention, and that is to be grateful. That is to be appreciative of what is that you're experiencing at that moment, because most probably that situation is going to help you overcome a bigger situation or something similar. And speaking of the support that you're mentioning, Claudia, I do want to include, and this is something I don't know what I want to mention it, but I do want to, is a lot of people go into the religious support, right? Or whatever support you want to go, always consider that there's always people that can support you. And in those people, you can include your coach. You can include a coach. Coaches are to hear you at your worst moment. We're there to not judge you. And if you feel stressed out, you feel that things are not working the way you planned them, that you feel like an imposter because you feel you don't belong, or you feel that somebody does not belong, you want to check your biases. All of these support systems, from religious to coaching to consultants to spiritual guides and all these kind of people, there's always somebody to help you. What matters is you be honest with yourself and be grateful of what you're experiencing, and even if it sounds ridiculous. I'm going to speak as very, very grateful when I experienced a fallout with a trainer, because she helped me realize the importance of putting your values and putting your limit to the things you're going to allow to happen. Because number one, things don't happen to you. You allow for things to happen to you. So you have to be aware of how much control you have. And that's when I felt, oh my God, this person is giving me control over what I can do, what I don't want to do, what I want to experience, and how I don't want to feel next time. That was incredible. It was hard. It was nerve-wracking, but she helped me see the importance of what I don't want to experience.
Yeah.
And what to stay away from. So that's the kind of thing where I mean to be grateful, right? What do you think?
I think that it ties right into the reframing of any kind of setback, however painful it looks at the moment, as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to experience that particular thing. Actually, one lovely way of putting it, I remember, was by a Zen master named Sherry Huber. She was out in California and she was having a podcast, gosh, years ago, that I listened to her. And whenever, somebody talked on her show about, something that had happened and things like that, she said, it is a great opportunity for spiritual practice. That was always her thing. And it was so insightful that it kind of stuck with me, because there's something, you might not be able to grasp it in the moment, but like every cloud has a silver lining. And I think one huge strategy is to go and, just look, what is an opportunity in this situation? What is an opportunity in this? And if your plan A failed, maybe this is the opportunity to quickly devise a plan B. And who knows if your plan B is not actually going to be better, or if you fell out with a person that it's not actually ultimately to your benefit, that that didn't go any further and stuff like that. Even though it's painful, but on the other hand, there might be opportunities lurking there. So how can we grow from this? How can we try to see the silver lining and bring this positivity back into it? And for me, positivity and gratefulness are very intimately linked. So, how can we turn this around and look at it more from an opportunistic kind of view? And please, please, please don't always immediately fall into a victim mentality, okay? It just nobody is out there necessarily to get you, and things don't work out. So I think that's probably quite important. I think that what sometimes gets in the way of us doing that at that moment is just our bodily sensations of stress and anxiety. The emotional and charge and the stress response is such that, we don't think too clearly. It's too painful. It's too stressful. So when you have clients coming to you with those kind of symptoms, how would you talk to them, and what would you coach them along with?
I would coach them about something that we've learned into the cultural environment that we've been involved, and that is to get out of their comfort zone. Getting out of the comfort zone is about making big decisions. But what nobody tells you about making big decisions is that most of the times you already have mastered your trade, right? You already know the ins and outs, what could possibly go wrong, at least at an 80%, and what could possibly go right. And when I think about getting out of the comfort zone, is that it requires a good communication process. It requires for you to be able to express what you're trying to express or communicate. It involves, for example, I'm going to give an example. That's the only thing I'm going through my mind, just so I don't forget it, and then I can go on. I remember when I heard so say, the best way to succeed and to push forward is not have plan B. Why? Because in his mind, he thought, if I have plan B or C, it just means that I'm allowing myself to fail. But this is exactly, I'm thinking, well, okay. So I am, because he has his craft mastered, he can give himself the opportunity to say, I am only going to go to plan A because I have 20 people behind me that are going to make sure that plan A does not fail. But when you are alone, when you are in the loneliness of your life, when it sounds really deep, but when I say it's your career, because only when it comes about career and life, it's only you. You're the only person there to make decisions about your life. And so that's when I say the loneliness of your life. You don't have 20 you telling you, yes, boss, no, boss. You have only yourself to decide whether A, B, C, or taking Y is going to be the right route, right? And so I always tell people, look, getting out of your comfort zone requires for you to think outside the box, to give yourself the opportunity. What is that you want to achieve? What are you trying to achieve? What is the purpose of this? And so you ask the person to ask themselves the right questions so that they can move forward.
Yeah, and
I think,
gather their courage at that moment to just go for it, right?
Exactly. And it takes time and practice. That's why that's the whole purpose of this conversation. When I think about Sylvester Stallone, he has had the time and the practice, thank God, because he has a strong career, a very long career, and a group of people that help him be an A person. But those of us that don't only have us and our thoughts and the practice to continue pushing forward. What do you think?
Well, I think that, getting out of the comfort zone, sometimes it takes a setback for us to have the courage and try something new, and because there is no choice but to break out of our comfort zone to make things move forward. So that already sometimes is one of those opportunities, those blessings in very, very major disguise that can happen in situations like that, right? I mean, if your house burns down, you have to learn how to deal with it and how to maybe get by with less, and you have to scramble just for your basic life things, right? So and then it could always be worse. I'll also rest on that it could always have been worse even beyond that.
Yep.
And I think that it comes down very often, like I say it once every episode, I think it comes down to assumption and expectation management. So much of these things are, because you might have done something and you might consider it a setback, but maybe what you did is perfectly fine. It's just maybe that it didn't reach the level of perfection or the level of success that you for yourself had to find in your head. But maybe it's not actually as bad as you think, right? So I think that is also something that ties in again with the stress and anxiety. Very often these things happen is because we shoulder too much of a burden. And a lot of this burden is self-imposed. Things have to be just so, and things have to be just perfect. And God forbid, if something happens, you're losing face. But, it's just a blip on the radar, but you think it's this momentous thing that's going to tarnish your life forever, and you're going to be a failure forever. It's sometimes maybe those expectations that then run rampant in your brain, and those assumptions you make about the reaction of others or the impact of this happening on the rest of your life might be grossly overestimated, right? And might just be a little bit out of whack. So I think that if you find yourself really stressed and anxious, check your assumptions, check your expectations, and see if they're real or if they're just, for all intents and purposes, imaginary. Are they just things that you think and might not even be real, or could be modified in such a way that they are more manageable? Because if you see the fastest way to reduce your stress response is to change your perspective. It's to change your perspective, because it is an anxiety that whatever's happening is far removed from what you expect, is far removed from what you want to do, from your wants and needs and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you can kind of then go through this cognitive exercise of checking that and maybe moderating a little bit the intensity of what you expected and stuff like that, your body will also be able to relax, because it isn't as bad. It isn't as bad, right?
Well, I don't know. Let me give you an example of something. You made me think of a good example.
Go ahead.
So when I was little, and I'm saying when I was like around 10, 12 years old, I don't know why, I would dream about working at McDonald's or Burger King. It was like a thing that they would make for young kids for summer school to go and work at these fast food places. And it would be like so much fun. And, yay, you get to talk with people and la, la, la. And so when I had just turned 18, I have the opportunity to go and work in California in a Burger King. Just so that you know, Burger King was my favorite restaurant in the entire world. I don't know why, but it just turned out that that's where I was working. And when I started working, my perception, my idea, my expectations were exactly what the commercial was teaching me. I don't know what it was. I think there was so much pride in the hat and the little shirt that said Burger King, and there was pride, okay? And I truly believed it. I really thought that it was going to be something where I would just be punching little buttons and boom, I would just give them their money and the order would automatically appear. That's all I thought. What really was going to happen. It was a setback for me, because I realized that I had to be cleaning the stove. I had to be making the hamburgers. I had to be working the window. And then I had to be rushing towards the orders because somebody else was busy over here. And then one day they tried to make me wash bathrooms, and that's where I said, no, this is not completely my expectation.
A bathroom cleaning girl.
Exactly. I was like, you got it all wrong, mister. This is not a cleaning person. And so I quit. I only worked there for a month and a half. The day that they made me clean bathrooms, I gave them the opportunity, still gave them the opportunity to say, you made a mistake. You need to hire somebody. There's somebody that does this kind of stuff, right? No, they said, well, if you're not willing to do the job, then you might as well just quit. And I quit. I was like, I don't need this. So you kind of think about, that is when you're young, right? And you kind of understand it from a young person, where there was pride in that kind of job, but they don't tell you what's behind it. Nobody's there to tell you what's behind it. I don't know if it would apply. I have to think about it, but I'm going to say it in a marriage, right? You go into a marriage, and in the values and traditions, you sometimes don't get out of a marriage because you believe that marriage is forever. And it might be the worst marriage. It could be the worst deal that you've ever gotten yourself into. And when you realize it, you kind of sit there and because I said that this was going to be forever. So that's another one. And then going to work in a corporate office, you think that it's about you carrying your little suitcase and looking nice and wearing your nice, 2-piece suits or 3-piece suits, whatever is your preference, and your nice hair and everything like that. And then you realize that your next door neighbor in the cubicle next to you screams when they talk over the phone, somebody chewing gum and popping gum. Over there, they have the music.
Or you have an unreasonable boss with unreasonable demands. And yeah.
Exactly. And then that's when you don't set the expectations, like you were saying, when you have unreal or unrealistic expectations, can go really wrong for you. And that is something that it is best to be discussed. And it is best for you to come to terms that certain things change. And if you can make them at least better, know that time way of going through setbacks, to know that time will heal.
Yeah, and when you have these ideas in your head that you mitigate it a little bit, instead of saying it is this way, I know it is this way, that you said, I think it might be this way, and wouldn't that be nice, right? If all I need to do is walk in all dolled up with my little suitcase and things like that, right? But it just might be that way, So take always your own assumptions with a grain of salt. And so, you're not as disappointed when it doesn't necessarily work out that way, right? And our expectations are always like that. And sometimes we're more enamored with the idea of something than with the actual execution of something. Endless are the number of coaches, myself included, that go into private practice, right? And then you have the rude wake-up call of, not only being a coach or consultant or trainer or whatever, but to also have to run a business and acquire clients and deal with marketing and do bookkeeping and all those kind of unglorious, tedious, kind of difficult things. Because guess what? You are a coach and you are not a bookkeeper and you're not a marketer and you're not a writer, copywriter, and things like that. So, you're enamored with the idea of going out there and conquering the world and being this wonderful coach to your clients. But, when you are going for that idea, also be aware that sometimes you have to do other things as well. So there's usually some kind of a price to pay. So don't be caught unawares, because in itself, it's not a setback, but it can very much feel like that, because you can think that you fail at this thing called a business. And, in the end, it's just, maybe caught you unawares, the intensity of it, that so much of your time might go towards these new endeavors and things like that, that you might not necessarily like, right? Definitely a thing. But then again, it's an opportunity to learn bookkeeping and at social media marketing and all those kind of things. So again, learn, remain open. I think that is like the most important thing. And this whole thing of not expecting that things are always going to go just so. So. Yeah.
Think about your plans as a what would be the best way to say it? Like an egg dessert, like an egg-based dessert. What would be the I'm trying to remember. A pavlova, right? Think about your plans as a pavlova. You put it in the oven, it looks beautiful, it looks amazing. Ah, yes, it puffs up and you're like,
and you open the stove door and what happens?
Life happens, reality hits, air happens.
The first little whiff of cold air, the thing is like disappeared. Where did it go? Where did it go?
Exactly. So you have two options. You can either laugh or you can cry. But
Yeah.
in that crying, you have to learn to learn. And you have to accept that it is just a dessert, right? At least it is not a human in an operating room. That is a real setback, you know? And so I'm not saying that you have to be like, well, at least this or at least that, because that's very toxic. But what I'm trying to really say is that the more aware that you go into whatever it is that you're trying to get yourself into, that it can go good or it can go bad or it can actually go in the middle, better the situation will be for you. Because being an independent business owner, I can tell you of 3 businesses that failed for me. And neither one could I say that it was actually a loss, because the first one made me invest in a ton of books. But all of those books, I use them now by coaching. So in a sort of a way, it was a place where I started so that I can go one step forward to where I want to go.
Yeah, sometimes you need these stepping stones, and in themselves, they might not be the end goal, but ultimately they form you. And if you chose a particular path, a particular way moving forward that is in alignment with your values and with your ultimate goals and with your preferences and tendencies and strengths, it might not be that exact thing that's going to be where you end up, but something ancillary for sure. And it might be just a stepping stone you need to move forward towards that. And I think a lot of folks that maybe look back on their life can then see it's like, oh yeah, because that didn't work out quite as well, this is why I ended up this way right here, right now, right? And so that is kind of the thing. You touched on another thing as well. It doesn't apply in all situations for all setbacks, but I think a good dose of humor can help, right? Like this, I had a lady friend in Texas, and she would always say like, would you look at that?
Yes. Would you look at that?
Would you
Yes.
look at that? Right? And it's just like, it's like the weirdest thing could happen. And it was just like, stuff blowing up or whatever, like furniture falling off the wall or whatever. Would you look at that? And that was kind of her default thing. It was like not necessarily being swayed so immediately, not taking it so hugely personally, but kind of taking it in stride. It was a good dose of humor. And the first reaction was always just, first let's have a good laugh about it, because we could not even in our wildest dreams have dreamt that this setback would happen. Like, would you look at that? And so, that's really something that sometimes can work. And if you are somebody who has maybe learned already in your normal day-to-day to be a little bit more relaxed about things and take things in stride and so on, when then these setbacks happen, it's very possible that also then you will have maybe a reaction that's not that dramatic immediately, but where you can kind of take a breath and maybe chuckle over it and then get back to remedy it. Yeah, but again, of course, there are situations that are just hard, and sometimes you do need help. If you have a loved one passing or something like that, those are not the things that you should laugh about, obviously. There's situations that are truly going to make you falter for a short amount of time while you recover from the shock and get used to just the idea. But then hopefully some of these strategies that we talked about here in terms of, seeing what does this mean, what can possibly be the silver lining in all of this, what can I do in this case, for instance, to honor that person as I move forward. Different ways of thinking about things can just be the way forward. We can't, in the least cases, can we allow ourselves to completely crumble and crawl into a hole and just disappear for an extended period of time while we figure this out. We kind of need to nevertheless, somehow keep going. And I think that the dialogue is internal. It's an internal game of what you believe, what you, how you reframe these things, what new insights this gives you. And then hopefully when you are able to come to grips with it cognitively, then, also relax on a more emotional level or in your body as well. What do you think?
It made me think that, not long ago, we didn't know what resilience was, or at least we didn't have a word for it. That resilience would be taught to more children, because everything that you said right now makes me think about the importance of pausing and reflecting. And it takes me to a place, a very, very sad place when I was young, where I had no ability to control my emotions. I was a child that would be led to throw fits. It wasn't that I couldn't control them, I would just be led to do them. And my parents would celebrate me throwing fits. They would take pictures of me because they thought it was funny. And in that process, instead of showing me how to manage or deal with my problems or even feel shame about my problems, I felt that it was the most natural thing to do when I felt stressed or oppressed. I would let things go. And when you say that, don't go to the dramatic side, I'm like, oh, yeah, thank goodness you didn't know me when I was young, because I threw fits like you have no idea. Like the 1930s movies, it's nothing. Okay, I would literally throw myself on the bed and I would just pull my hairs because I just wanted revenge, and I was so upset, and I would let my emotions go.
Right. And that is one extreme. The other extreme is not expressing your emotions at all.
That right? Is another extreme.
You have some parents that do not allow any emotional expression from their children, because if their child were to cry or make a scene, they wouldn't live to see the next day. I mean, it would be like, it would just not be tolerated. So here too, I think it's like in so many things, find the middle way.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Go overboard one thing that you hold everything in and it makes you sick ultimately, right? And then the other way is probably also not that conducive to a good resolution when you just go, all that dramatic. I think that there's a place, and if you feel like crying, cry, but don't cry for 3 weeks. Yeah. And so, I think that, you should accept that these emotions exist and so on. But they shouldn't necessarily be the only expression that you give in a situation.
Right. You shouldn't get to the chronic crying or the chronic pain, right? Or the chronic emotions. When you get to that point, then please seek help. Because, pain and feelings that get to the chronic stage are things that you have to learn how to manage, because they will hurt you. They will affect your performance. They will affect everybody around you. And the way that I learned, if there's anything that I can contribute to today to say this is how I managed my setbacks, was to have a very good friend. She is my best friend in Houston, Texas, who I could cry and cry and cry and scream and say why, how many times I wanted to. But we had a rule where we would eventually move on from why to this is how it has to be.
And what's next?
Right? And what's next? Exactly. So you cannot go from why for a year and then move to what's next to then go back to why, because then you do have a problem. And friends, you do so much. Because again, it's about what you're doing to yourself, right? So pause and reflect.
Yeah, because all these things, like if you get into such an emotional explosion that you can't, such an anguish that you can't liberate yourself from it, all these strategies that are very often also based on our cognitive abilities and trying to think about it and check our expectations, our assumptions, reframing the situation, trying to look maybe for opportunities that might be hiding and things like that. All that is zapped. You can't do it. You're not in a place when you're dissolved in tears or you're in this absolute state of shock. Let's say
you cannot see.
You can't do that work. You can't get out yourself, and so that's why you need help. And some folks might need medical help just to get over this initial hurdle, right? So there's no shame in that. Right?
No, absolutely not.
Get help. Us humans are very fragile, right? And you might just be in a nervous state or hormonal state or whatever that you can't help yourself in that situation. And so, just know that there's always help available. If you can still manage, reach out to your friendly coach. If you need medical help, get it. Sometimes if you need a friend's shoulder to cry on, by all means do that. And if you can handle it by yourself, do. Just try different alternatives until you find what gets you over that hump, because we always say we underestimate how far we can come over the long term. And even if nowadays you're like absolutely rock bottom, who says where you're going to be in 3 months, 6 months, 3 years, 6 years? And so, just keep plodding along, show up to your life, keep plodding along, and, stuff is going to happen. Not necessarily the way you expect, but stuff is going to happen. And that's all.
Yes, I think I want to say from my side one last thing, because it's 8:52 p.m. here in Saudi Arabia, so we're 8 minutes away from ending. With time, one of the things that I've learned is to understand that time passes. And one of the things that helped me to get through many, many, many of the hurdles in my life was to repeat to myself over and over, it too shall pass. But not only just repeat it, but after it had passed, even if it took me 5 years, 7 years, whatever time it took me, was to say, I learned a lesson, and this lesson was this.
And
because
pass, and indeed.
It did. It did. There are things, I'm not going to lie, there are things that I still hold on to. And as a coach, I'm ashamed to say that there are things that I still hold on grudges to. But those things I will eventually get over. Because like I said, the one thing that I've learned as I've aged is to know that thing, and that you live and you learn, and then you go back and you say, for this, how could I have been suffering about this? How did I tolerate this? And that is because people are yet to learn how to live. Please do not go through life alone. Ask for help. We are human, and it's very human to feel, to suffer, to cry, to experience life. What is not right is to go on it alone, because there is no successful person that has been able to reach success on their own.
Very good place to wrap up. Thank you. Shall we just put that as the final exclamation part of this episode? Thank you so much, Sandra. This was great. Everybody, thank you so much for listening, giving us the opportunity to provide this content for you. I think today was a good one. If you want to support us, please subscribe to the channel and show us some love by liking or giving us a comment or something like that. And we would greatly appreciate it. You can always reach us on LinkedIn or through our websites. And we will see you again next week, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Yes. So when I see Sandra today, I realize I need to step up my lipstick game. It's a great one. Yes, yes. Okay, everybody, take care. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.